and we should go up until about 10 o'clock. So welcome again, and so let us begin sitting upright, invoking the presence of the great masters to join us and bless us this Sunday morning. Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, great masters of self-realization, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashai, Swami Sri Yukteswar, and great master Paramahansa Yogananda, saints of all traditions, we invite thy presence to our satsang this morning. Fill us with thy joy, thy presence, thy peace, and enter in and take charge of our lives. Guide us on the highest path in everything we do, and may our footsteps be filled with joy, and may our life be a reflection of thy consciousness. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Now let's have a couple of chants.
only thee, Lord, thee, only thee. I want 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 only thee, Lord, thee, I want only thee, Lord, thee, only thee. I want only thee, Lord, thee, only thee. I want thee, Lord, thee, only thee. I want thee, Lord. I want only thee,
Now let's meditate. Let's sit up straight, relaxed position. Feet, if you're in a chair, firmly on the floor. If you're sitting on the floor, make sure that you're comfortable, spine is straight. And let's inhale and tense the whole body. Inhale, tense. Now throw the breath out. One more time, inhale, double breath. Hold, tense. Throw the breath out, double breath. And finally, one last time, let's inhale through the nostrils, double breath, and hold the breath, but no tension. Just hold the breath and focus your gaze at the point between the eyebrows with the breath held. Now, keeping your attention at that point, let the air out slowly. And now continue to breathe naturally through the nostrils, watching the air come into the body, exit the body through the nose. You can feel the body, its various parts, checking to release any tension you might have. Let it go. And let your gaze come back, your awareness of breath come back in the upper part of the nostrils. And feel as with each breath coming into the body, you're drawing in peace, joy, vitality. And as it goes out, you're releasing any tension, darkness, doubt. And slowly the whole body is becoming vitalized, filled with light. Inwardly smile. Sit joyfully, looking into the spiritual eye, drawing from there deep inner strength, deep inner joy, flooding you, driving away anything that's negative. Call to that joy and call to the Divine Mother behind that joy, behind that light. Reveal thyself, Mother, reveal thyself. Come as joy, peace, calmness. Let's sit and meditate for about 15 minutes. Om. 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 Now I'd like to begin with a reading. Master says, objective conditions are always neutral. It is how you react to them that makes them appear sad or happy. Work on yourself, on your reactions to outer circumstances. This is the essence of yoga, to neutralize the waves of reaction in the heart. Be ever happy inside. You will never be able to change things outwardly in such a way as to make them ever pleasing to you. Change yourself. Again, for those of you who joined us during our meditation, my name is Nayaswami Jaya, and I'm broadcasting this Zoom webinar from Pune. And this is, I was calculating before the discourse today, I was calculating that this is the 8th week of our lockdown. And perhaps some of you are counting too, marking it off on the calendar, the passage of days. And I remember when we first started the lockdown, it seemed, oh, we're going to be locked down for 2 weeks. Then it was 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and now here we are almost 8 weeks. And I have to tell you, if you're like me, I'm getting a little bit of lockdown fatigue. In other words, I'm losing track of the day. Is today Sunday? Oh, it could have been Thursday for all I know. I'm losing track of time, and one day is blending into the next. And I just long to get out a little bit more than I am now, to be able to do something. And I've somewhat the sense of isolation from other people that I usually interact with and work with. My normal routines have been upset. And so consequently, it's getting a bit tiring. And I know what's happened is when we first started this, I had this very short-term perspective of what was going to happen. We're going to be locked down, then we'll be back, and things would be back to normal. And maybe I began to even, I can't remember hardly, but how I viewed this whole viral situation. It was going to be something coming in, happening a little while, and then it was going to go away. And now I think all of us have come to realize that we're in this for a longer haul. Maybe this lockdown is going to come to an end here soon, but the presence of this virus in the background of our lives, the disruption that has happened, is not going away next month. It's probably going to be with us for a longer time. And as I was beginning to internalize that reality over the last week or two, I began to compare it a little bit, that it seemed like we were starting off here with a sprint. You know, we're going to put out a lot of energy and we're going to lock down and be very rigorous, and then this will address this virus situation. And that didn't happen. It's continued pretty much as unabated in a moderate way here in India, but nevertheless, it hasn't gone down or gone away. And I realized that sprint was not going to sustain me. And I had to basically change my attitude, and why I chose the topic title for this week, Be a Long Distance Runner. Now, here I'm addressing this in relationship to this virus, because we're going to have to be a long distance runner with this. How to accommodate, how do we keep a pace that's going to be able to sustain us over a marathon, not over 100 meters. But isn't this also, you could say, our spiritual life as well? We come onto the spiritual path, and where perhaps we take it up in some fashion or another. And certainly many people come on to this particular path. They maybe read the autobiography of a yogi, some other inspirational book, and there's a great deal of enthusiasm, and let's get going, and they want to get Kriya very quickly. They get Kriya, they practice, and then something sometimes happens. They reach a certain plateau and they realize, oh, this is what I came to at least. Oh, this is not a sprint. This is going to be a long distance race. And we have to then adjust ourselves accordingly to that, because the sprinter's mentality is actually good. It's good to be, we want to be that fired up enthusiasm to let's get it now. I remember reading the autobiography of the yogi, and he comes to the chapter on samadhi, and that's for me. And so very diligently jumping into whatever I did on the spiritual life, and with that sort of enthusiasm. And that's good. That's good. So, but we also need this other element too, because we realize we don't want to be like so many of those that are all fired up and enthusiastic. And then after a little while, where'd they go? When this Natendra asked me to do this for Gurgaon, I couldn't help but think one of my favorite Gurgaon stories, which I use, not in Gurgaon, at other places when I'm speaking about some topic, is this story that I associate with Gurgaon. Because some years ago, I was giving maybe some of you were there. Actually, there 5 years ago when it was, we did this Holy Science 4-week series, and one of the attendees. Now, I hope you're not in the audience, or maybe you are in the audience. It's good, but you sparked something in me. Came up to me after the first class and said, "That was great. I really loved your class, and but I very, very much want to meditate with you. I'm so inspired and really pumped up with enthusiasm." And I said, "Well, okay, why don't you come by the ashram, and I'll, in the morning, I meditate usually a couple hours in the morning. And why don't you come by? Come by." And he says, "Yes, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there. I'll be there." Definitely. Yeah, right. Definitely. And then, so the next day I go out and I make sure the gate's unlocked. Nobody doesn't show up. Second day doesn't show up. Third day, it never did show up ever. And I don't even remember if that person came back to the second, third, or fourth class. And we don't want to be like that. Somebody, in other words, all fired up, but then have no sustaining ability to keep us going. And this is unfortunately not uncommon on the spiritual path. And we have to be aware of this. And here we are in situations in life, not just for our meditation, our sadhana, but things in life. We have to have a longer rhythm perspective of what we're doing. And particularly with our spiritual life, we have to build it on the foundation, solid, and something that is going to be able to be sustained over a period of time in the face of adversity. And I think that's what we're seeing right here now. We have to build our Kriya practice, our sadhana practice. We have to have that solid. Swami Kriyananda once gave a series of suggestions for how do we sustain ourselves on the long haul on the spiritual path. I think one of those is built on the foundation of a good daily sadhana. But we have to be real with ourselves. What can we sustain? And sometimes we get all enthusiastic. We go great for a month and then it falls off. We be real. What can we do? And build that up with self-discipline and control to something you can sustain over the years. Now, let me take it even further, over the decades, over a lifetime. And this is, I think we need to have this perspective. If you take a rupee coin and you put it right up by your eye, all you see is a rupee coin. You can't see anything else. But if you pull that coin away from your eye and you look at it at a distance, you can say, yeah, there's the rupee coin, but I can see a lot of other world as well. And this is perspective. We put something up close and that's all we can see. And we don't realize there's a lot more to the world than that rupee coin. And so same thing with us in our spiritual life, we have to have the fervor to be, yes, say yes. All I see is the rupee coin. But then we have to have the common sense to know, can I sustain this over? And so you have to have a certain perspective. Now, I was very fortunate. I don't know. I think it was an act of grace, certainly nothing on my side, I think, is that when I first came to these teachings, I was like the sprinter. I had that, but I wasn't a very good sprinter. I had the enthusiasm, but not the skill, you might say, to really go in application. So for me, a little bit of meditation was plenty, but I slowly built it up. But it probably took me a couple of years. But after I was this, and the grace comes in this. After a couple of years, I came to this realization. I received Kriya that this is going to take a long time. It's not something, doesn't have to take, a master says, doesn't have to take a long time. If you think God is with you right now, you can have him right now. And if you think a long time, it'll be a long time. So putting those arguments aside, my common sense told me that I need to make a commitment for a lifetime. And I said, because I was 100% convinced of the teachings, but I realized I had to give them a fair test. And a fair test was not going to be for a year or two. And I intuitively understood that I will practice these for a lifetime to give them a fair test to see if it's true or not. And somehow it didn't seem unusual to me, but it was a certain impersonality of looking at something over the scope of a long rhythm of a lifetime and say, yes, I will commit to that. And so consequently, it's sustained me to some degree that I've been able to see things in a longer rhythm. And I think we have to see them in that way to be able to keep sustaining ourselves, because plateaus will come, there'll be ups, there'll be downs, and there'll be those long plateaus sometimes that are in between those. And during those times, we have to sometimes struggle to be able to keep going, but we have to make that commitment. We have to keep our eye on the goal. I tell this story sometimes about years ago when I was a young man. I was up in the forest, some friends, and we had to cross a very deep ravine on a fallen log. And I thought, no problem. I'll just go walk across. I did. I walked across, but I stopped halfway and looked down. And it was way down there. I realized if I fell, I'd probably break a leg at least, and if not kill myself if I fell off that log. And in the act of doing that, my knees became weak. And you've heard this term, my knees turned to water. Well, that actually happened, and I had to collapse down on the log on my rear end and shimmy my way across. Now, what was the problem there? I looked down. I stopped. I hesitated. I should have kept my eye on the goal of where I was going, the other side of that log, and that would have been perfectly fine. And this is how it is for us too, is once we start on this path, if you want to hesitate before you get on the log. But once you're going, you got to go, and you got to keep going. And you have to make that commitment that you're going to go to the end of this lifetime, and you'll sustain it. And that's a fair test. If you start saying, well, maybe I'll give it 5 years, 10 years, no, you've probably sunk yourself already by saying that. Now, why don't I say go beyond a lifetime? Because you don't have any control over that. And if I had control over that, maybe I would, but I can't presume to have control over that at this point in my life. But I can make a commitment to that. So make a commitment and have a firm sadhana and say, at least I will do this. And you find yourself, you can go the long run. And then the ups and downs that come, virus or no virus, whatever it is, you're going to be able to weather them. Now, as we go along on the long distance, to be a long distance runner, our biggest obstacle, I think, on this is not the obstacles. As that reading I was saying there at the beginning, things are outward circumstances are neutral. You make of them what you will. Like we're faced with an obstacle now, and it's just no better, no worse than any other obstacle, perhaps in the impersonal sense, but it'll pass. But the biggest one inwardly is our obstacle there is keeping our inspiration up. Indifference is the biggest one. And this is sometimes you see, and you can sometimes see it in others. Sometimes we see it in ourselves. We become indifferent. I don't care. Uh-oh, if you start feeling like that, you get up in the morning, am I going to meditate? I don't care if I meditate or no, not anymore. I just don't, it's not meaningful to me. That's, from a spiritual point of view, can be deadly. Be careful. And so, and that's your enemy, that indifference of not wanting to even try, not wanting to do, and it's pernicious and sneak in there at times. And when the energy is low, you find that little starts to nibble at you. Well, this is the importance of course, keeping ourselves inspired, and of course, commitment helps at those times because you know, Mr. Commitment, I'm Mr. Indifference, I've seen you coming in my door before, and I know that you mean no good. You gotta get out of here. And that attitude, you could say, comes from experience. Now, I've been doing this for decades now, so I've seen that Mr. Indifference try to knock himself into the house, and you just don't let him get in. Once you have a few bouts with them in the early days, you let them in, you realize, no, that's not going to help you. So you have to recognize that quickly and do everything you can to prevent that. And the way to battle indifference is, of course, the opposite. You have to put out energy. You have to put out a certain amount of fervor of what you're doing. And from time, we can't live it at that high pitch necessarily in every moment of our life, but we have to have that understanding that there's a certain amount of fervor on some level is needed. Swami, I mentioned, gave some hints about how to last a lifetime, you might say, on a spiritual path for the long distance runner. And it's kind of an interesting thing because you have to have the long distance runner, but you also have to sprint too from time to time. It's not either or, but you have to be able to do a little of both, because you can just plod along for not just a lifetime, for dozens of lifetimes if you don't have some fervor. So we have to have a certain amount of that. And one of the second things I mentioned, sadhana being one of them, that firm foundation to carry you through no matter what happens. The second one he mentioned was the spiritual life to you, to us, to me, needs to be perceived as a matter of life and death. Yeah, it's life and death. It's like being on that high wire. It's a matter of life and death. And so it doesn't matter how long that wire is or that log was that I was walking across there. It was important that I kept my eye on the goal. It was important that I didn't allow myself to go down the slippery side. And so our spiritual life has to be perceived in that way. This is a matter of life and death. Death in the sense of spiritual death. Death in the sense of confining ourselves to who knows how many lifetimes of indifference, lifetimes of suffering that would come with that, the loss of our, as they say in the Catholic tradition, the loss of our vocation, of our spiritual sense of purpose in life. Now, nobody's lost forever, and we must realize that. It's our destiny ultimately to come back to God. But with that destiny, that's a long time. And when we feel that presence of God in our heart, we realize it's suffering to be away from that. I don't want to be away from it. That's what I want. So it has to be a matter of life and death for us. In other words, it's important. This is an important thing for us. And if you keep that sense of urgency alive, I guess is what I'm saying here, this will be helpful to have that sense of urgency. But when we're going for a long distance pace like this, and we have this sense of urgency, we have a good foundation, it also, in a sense, we realize, and I think this comes with impersonality, you see this in the longer rhythm, you realize that you really, really need to be honest with yourself and find a comfort level in your own approach to life, to spiritual path, to your fellow devotees, what you're doing. One that's not complacent, but one that's real for you. You have to be real and honest with yourself. People sometimes come onto the spiritual life and they join other devotees and they put on a false face of what they're doing. They're affirming, which is good. We're affirming I'm a great yogi, I'm a dedicated person, and I'm this and that. Now that is good. We affirm it, and eventually we become it. But then there's this other part of ourselves that we need to be who and what we are, not somebody else. And so we need to understand, who am I? And make that perfectly spiritual. Clean it up. You're not going to be able to live somebody else's dharma. You have to live your own dharma, who and what you are, and how can you make yourself as clean as possible in the clothes that you're wearing, not wearing somebody else's clothes. And so not pretending, not living from the outside in. In other words, this is what everybody else does, so I guess I'm going to do that too. Well, that's okay for a start, because sometimes we don't know what to do. But in the long run, we have to go within ourselves and say, what is my relationship with God? God, how do I see you? Master, how do I see you? And express that and make that as pure as possible. Don't compare yourself with anybody else. And I'll tell you a little, I'm kind of telling a story on myself. I'm not proud of this, but it happened. And this way is that when I first came to know Swami Kriyananda, he was, if you ever knew him, if you knew of him, or even if you know of him, the man was a talented man. He was good at just about whatever he did, although he used to joke about himself that he said, well, he's terrible with knowing how to fix anything mechanical. And he says, I can't fix anything mechanical. When I start the car, I just propitiate the gods, hoping that it starts. He had no sense of mechanics. But if you looked at creative endeavors, books, writings, speaking, his interpersonal relationships, he could do it all. And I didn't have any of those talents. And I noticed when I first got to know him, I was so impressed. I was just in awe. And after a while, I kind of resented it a little bit, because it's like standing in the shadow of somebody else. You kind of feel, oh, doggone it, why can't I be like that? And I realized it was a silly thing to feel, and silly thing, but I kept comparing myself. He's so good, it made me feel bad, because I thought, I need to be a good singer. I need to be a good writer. And that's what it means to be a spiritual person. And that's what it means to be somebody who has some accomplishment. And it took me many years. Finally, I realized how ridiculous that approach was. But I realized too that oftentimes that's how we go about life. We compare ourselves to others, and we don't put our attention where it really needs to be, is cleaning up the mess that it's in myself, and let God take care of whatever, however the light wants to shine through us. But we have to, like a stained glass window, we have to remove the dirt and dust and debris. And what the picture of what that stained glass window is going to look like, well, I don't need to worry so much about that. I just need to make it clean. And then as time goes by, you begin to get a little bit of perspective, and you realize there are never going to be two people in this universe that are exactly the same. In terms of the same particular qualities. But each of us are faced with the same dilemma of cleaning it up. And this is what Swami used to say this over and over again, but like I say, it took me some years to be able to internalize that that's true. We have to be our cleanest best that we can possibly be. And Swami once said, he said, if people can't think in terms of God, because that word is, whatever reason they don't like that word. causes a reaction. He said, think in terms of your potential. Every person is trying to reach their highest potential. And no two of us are exactly alike. And so we have to reach that highest potential in our own individual way. And so when I say being honest with ourselves, it's meaning what I'm saying is don't give false justification. Be very self-analytical about what your motivations are. Don't make excuses for yourself. Say, well, I'm not meditating much anymore because I'm so busy and I've got other things, and one excuse after the other excuse, and plus I'm not sure if this path is right for me. And pretty soon you go down that slippery slope. Be very honest. And oftentimes we find that self-honesty particularly applies to our own ego motivations. Why are we doing something? Why are we saying something? And if we're not willing to particularly look in that mirror, it's like walking around. If I was to have a big stain on my shirt right here, and I see, because I can't see down here, right? I couldn't see it. The only way I can really see that is when I look in the mirror. And everybody'd be looking at me kind of strange. Boy, that guy walking around with that big stain on his shirt. He's giving Sunday service. He's got a big mark there. And I wouldn't see it because I hadn't looked in the mirror. And so, and this particularly is important for the long distance runner, because it's only when we're really honest with ourselves and clear with ourselves, not exalting it ourselves or anything, that we're going to be able to relax. Because if we have a false front in any way, it becomes very heavy, and you get tired, and you don't see your own faults very well. Not to criticize yourself, but so you can correct them. And the longer it goes, sometimes the harder it is to correct those. So I think this ability to be the long distance runner requires, some of these, a few things that I've mentioned, but underneath it, I started by saying the need for keeping yourself inspired, clean, good sadhana, urgent, but inspired. Now, how do you do that? And I think this is, I'm going to actually give a little talk to meditation teachers this afternoon in West Delhi, or maybe they're yoga teachers. And one of the points I'm going to make is, if you want to share something with somebody else, you need to be inspired to share what you're sharing. But then as I thought about that, I thought one of the ways to be inspired is to share with other people, because it forces you to be a channel. And I think if we find our meditation is hard, we find that we're indifferent, we find that things are not going very well, we find that I'm playing games with myself, and not being totally honest. Well, I say a last resort, it's not really the last resort, it might be the first resort. Be a channel of service in some fashion. Now, Paramahansa Yogananda said, if you want to serve my work, if you want to be in tune with me, serve my work. Now, he meant that maybe specifically to be in tune with him as a guru, and serving his work, maybe he meant about sharing his message. But I think I have always taken that in a longer perspective, a longer, more universal sense, is if you want to feel something, in this case, we're saying inspiration, serve in something that is inspirational. And in the process of being a channel for inspiration in some fashion, you yourself become inspired. You start to take on that. And so consequently, let's not limit this, say, to Yogananda's teachings, but let's say we want joy. We don't, and a lack of inspiration might be defined as that. I just don't feel joyful. I don't feel anything. I'm indifferent. If you want joy, you need to be able to serve joy in some way, to be a channel for joy to go through you. And so consequently, you need to get into action in some fashion and become an instrument for sharing something with somebody else, with other people, the world at large. And you may not be able to feel anything at first, but if you put yourself into motion to a good cause, to helping your neighbors, to sharing in some fashion or another, in the right attitude, not selflessly, as I guess is what I'm saying, not selfishly, you'll find that if you want to be joyful, you'll start to acquire it that way. You have to bring joy into your life in some way, and it won't happen very easily if you're passive. We have to act in life. The Gita talks about action and inaction. And so we have to act, and what we act with and the attitude we are acting in is going to determine what we're going to gain out of that. So if you're in that plateau point in your spirituality, if you're feeling a certain amount of indifference to it, get active, do something. And sometimes I have a little, not a harmonium, it's electronic keyboard next to my meditation seat in my room. And sometimes I'm meditating and I'm just, I don't feel anything. I'm just wasting my time sitting there. I pick up that keyboard and I just start chanting, I want only thee, Lord, thee, only thee. And I get something moving. It's the same thing if you want inspiration in writing. You better just start writing. And if you put your mind on it, you start to draw that. The other day, my flatmate, Aditya, and I, we wanted to start cooking something, and I mean, so we got really into it. We started cooking. We ended up making, because we were housebound here, locked down. And it's inspiration started coming. Oh, we could do this, we could do that. You have to have motion and action. And it's like riding a bicycle. If you're riding a bicycle and you want to stay upright, you have to pedal. You can't stand there and stay upright. You have to be in motion. And then once you get into motion, then you can start using the handlebars to guide you to go left, right, whichever way you want to go. So take these few thoughts that I've shared, and let me just recapitulate here, and I've got a little bit of time left. Life or death, this is important. Long distance perspective, a lifetime. Based on a foundation of sadhana, effort. Make a commitment. I'm going to do this. Come heck or high water. I'm going to do this, and at least I can try. I'm going to sit here. Just, Master, if you don't come to me, it's in your hands, but I'm going to sit here, and I'm going to pray, and I'm going to chant, and by God, I'm going to call. I'm praying for thy grace to come. So we have to do our side. What did see? I'm missing one. Honesty. I mean, being self-honest, being a long distance runner, and sticking to it. You just put one foot in front of the other and just keep on going. And you don't know how long it's going to be before God comes. But if you just keep moving ahead, and yet mentally have the attitude of a sprinter. It's not bad to, it's that balancing point. You've got to have fervor, but you've got to be in there to the end of the race. And so it's been my pleasure to be here with you in Gurgaon. And I'm sorry that I haven't been able to physically come up there. And obviously now is not a very good time, but I wish you all the best. Keep your Sangha strong now in a time of challenge, a time with this virus in India, and we don't know what's going to happen, but we keep ourselves steady, and let's be long distance runners with this challenge outwardly that we're facing here. Every non-dissenter is facing the same thing. financial difficulties, keeping the Sangha magnetic, uh, you know, the change in routines that's happening to everybody. But at the same time, what I've noticed, and this is throughout all our centers, it's a time for people to also step up, and they're stepping up, in beautiful ways. People serving, being creative, and that's something sometimes you need to be shooken up a little bit in order to think new ways to doing things. And so all of us are being challenged in this way, and all of us, I hope you feel that sense that we're in this together, and we're not just Ananda Sangha, we're in this together with our brothers and sisters, throughout the country, and those that we know, those that we don't know, because it's a time when, as we've been using this phrase, warriors of light, it's a time for all of us to come together and show extra strength. You're not going to be strong wrestling weaklings, is what Master used to say. And so now we have an opponent, you might say, to wrestle and make us stronger. And so let's gather together in this way, and let's keep ourselves strong in this way. And I hope very much to be able to share with you again. It's a joy for me to be able to do this. And so God bless all of you, and thank you, Natendra, for inviting me this week. Om Guru. Oh.